I want to first note that there are going to be spoilers for all 5 seasons of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power in this video. This is my interpretation of the show. It may not be the same as your interpretation, or as the makers of the show intended it to be interpreted. So if you disagree with my points, or want me to elaborate more on my points, then please ask me in the comments. I value your insight. Angella and Shadow Weaver from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power are 2 characters that are typically compared to each other, and for good reason. Both act as mother figures to main characters in the show, both are in positions of leadership on opposite sides of the war, and both have their stories ended through self-sacrifice. And though Angella seems to be universally loved, and her sacrifice regarded as heroic and tragic, Shadow Weaver appears to be universally despised, and her sacrifice interpreted as either a last-ditch effort to emotionally scar Catra and Adora, or as a result of having nothing left to live for. I believe that Shadow Weaver's sacrifice is more meaningful than that though, and along with Angella, Shadow Weaver tells a story of the interplay between power and action. Angella is an incredibly powerful being, and it is her lack of action which is ultimately the cause of her sacrifice. On the other hand, Shadow Weaver lacks power, but has the motivation to act, and her sacrifice is brought on by trying to act with a power that she can't control. Let's look at Angella first. Angella is the immortal Queen of Bright Moon, with immense magical power. Though she is not as powerful as She-Ra, I would expect her to be on a similar scale to Glimmer in Season 4 or 5. Though Angella is incredibly powerful and in a position of leadership, her strategy in the war against the Horde is largely non-existent. At the start of the show, Glimmer is the one that pushes to fight back while Angella stands passively in the background discouraging Glimmer from any sort of violence. In Season 1, Episode 10, The Beacon, we find out that this is because Angella ordered the mission where they lost Micah. She never forgave herself, and in her fear of loss she let the old Princess Alliance fall apart, and she prevented Glimmer from fighting the war on the Horde. All Angella wants is to have a safe life with her daughter. This confession of her guilt to Glimmer marked a shift in Angella's mindset towards her loved ones, as she let Bo and Glimmer go find Adora in Season 1, Episode 12, Light Hope, and she helped Glimmer prepare for an attack on Bright Moon in Season 1, Episode 13, The Battle of Bright Moon. Though Angella accepted that Glimmer wouldn't be passive as she would, Angella still did not change her own mindset, and during the Battle of Bright Moon, she acted as a last defense for the Moonstone, while Glimmer went on the offensive. In Angella's first interaction with Glimmer, Glimmer has a very funny quote. "How are we supposed to hold our own against the Horde if we keep retreating? Pretty soon we won't have anything left to defend." This is actually a serious critique of Angella's tactics though, and in the season finale, Glimmer's quote rings true as the Horde has taken the fight all the way to the Moonstone, the last thing to possibly defend, and Angella is left to defend it. If not for Glimmer's work on reuniting the princesses throughout the season, this likely would have been the end of the rebellion. In Season 2, Episode 1, The Frozen Forest, we see Angella back to her former glory, running a war room meeting for the Princess Alliance. Though just like in the original Princess Alliance, Angella has no ambition to go into the field. In Season 3, Episode 1, The Price of Power, Angella learns of the larger Horde army from Shadow Weaver, and in Season 3, Episode 4, The Moment of Truth, it is revealed that Angella had been planning an attack with the Princess Alliance on the Horde. But Glimmer comes back with news of Adora's capture, accelerating the urgency of their attack. Glimmer and Angella have an intense argument. Angella isn't willing to let Glimmer go with a half-assed plan, but Angella cannot produce a plan of her own. Glimmer calls out Angella for being dominated by fear. Angella ends up pulling the Queen card and vetoing Glimmer's plan. So Glimmer goes to Shadow Weaver, who opposite of Angella, is always willing to take action. Angella learns of Glimmer's actions and she rushes to stop them before they can teleport into the Fright Zone. But Angella arrives too late, and watches as Glimmer vanishes from her. However, even in Glimmer and Shadow Weaver's rush to action, they were unable to stop the portal from being opened. In the alternate reality, Angella is reminded of reality by Glimmer, and she parts with Micah to go help Glimmer. She shows up too late to save Glimmer, but Adora is still there. To now save reality, someone must stay behind to take the sword from the portal, and now Angella realizes that the only way to keep Glimmer safe is to take action, and sacrifice herself. She admits to Adora that she is a coward, that she let Micah and Glimmer be brave while she watched from the distance. Angella explains how she was inspired by Adora because Adora never lets fear stop her. I believe that this is a misconception by Angella. Adora is never afraid for her own safety. Her only fear is in being unable to save others, so Adora's actions are actually what she would logically do. But anyways, Angella was inspired by Adora, and that gave her the courage to correct the mistakes of her past and to act, as it is now the only way that Glimmer could be safe. Angella's sacrifice is tragic, as she is so meaningful to Glimmer, Bo, and Adora, and her last interaction with Glimmer was messy, to put it lightly. Furthermore, her sacrifice at surface value is required due to the actions of Catra and the Horde, but Angella's sacrifice is actually necessary by her own design, due to her apathy. Angella's story is one of great power and great responsibility, except Angella never uses her power to live up to the responsibility. While Angella never personally attacks the people of the rebellion, she is content to sit at the head of the War Council, coming up with passive plans of non-action and retreat, which allow the Horde to continue their systematic colonization of Etheria. When action is taken, Glimmer has usually pushed for it, and Angella only chooses to put herself in the way of physical harm as the absolute last resort. Angella's motivation for this is to protect herself and Glimmer, though she is less able to control Glimmer. Eventually, Angella's passiveness catches up with her though. It is her failure to take action while having the power to do so that puts her in a position where her sacrifice is necessary if she wants to save Glimmer. She realizes this as the situation has evolved to a point where death is unavoidable, and instead of signing up Adora for that fate, Angella realizes that given her power, she must finally live up to her responsibility. Angella's road to sacrifice is interesting, and perhaps not as innocent as one may initially think. This was certainly the case for me. Let's look at Shadow Weaver's path to sacrifice now. In Season 2, Episode 6, Lightspinner, Shadow Weaver is shown to hunger for power, as she wishes to cast the spell of obtainment, to make herself more powerful. She also looks to control and mold the power of others, through teaching Micah how to use magic, and by taking in Adora to raise her as her own. But why does Shadow Weaver want power? Power alone is meaningless. It only has value when it can be put towards something. Well, initially Shadow Weaver explains about the Horde invasion and the ineffectiveness of the princesses to stop it, to Micah and the Sorcerer's Guild. Shadow Weaver wants power because she is a woman of action, but she lacks the resources to carry out any action that could stop the invasion. The Sorcerer's Guild refuses the responsibility to fight off the Horde because they lack the power to do so, and they have no intention of getting more power and the responsibility that comes with it. Disgusted by this, Shadow Weaver decides to cast the spell of obtainment using Micah. Micah realizes the evil of the spell and bails mid-cast, but the spell works, and Shadow Weaver is able to take the power of the people of the Sorcerer's Guild, but she stops before taking Micah's power. Shadow Weaver leaves Mysticor and goes to the Fright Zone to help bring Hordak to victory. She can't really stay in Mysticor anymore, or anywhere where Mysticor would be allied. But Shadow Weaver didn't agree with the apathetic philosophy of Mysticor regardless of this lack of choice. In the Fright Zone, Shadow Weaver is given use of the Black Garnet, and she decides to mold Adora's power to use as her own as well. As we come to learn in the series, Hordak is a shut-in, and Shadow Weaver to an extent is able to use her power and responsibility to really shape most of the Horde's operations. Adora is inherently protective of others, as Etheria chose her to be She-Ra. But as the one with the most power, Shadow Weaver conditioned her to be the one that was also responsible for others, albeit to an extreme extent. As we find out in Season 4, Episode 5, Protocol, the Horde soldiers are brought up with a strong sense of loyalty and family, which is likely Shadow Weaver's doing, but could also debatably be Hordak's doing, as loyalty and family are ever present in Horde Prime's army. He even refers to people as brother and sister, though Hordak doesn't seem interested in the well-being of his own army. Catra is the truly dark mark on Shadow Weaver's resume in the Horde, though. Shadow Weaver tries to explain to Catra in Season 1, Episode 10, the Beacon, that she was so hard on her to prepare her for the world and to make her strong. And in Lightspinner, she explains that nothing ever came easy for her, and why should it be any different for Catra? As Catra doesn't possess as much power as Adora, Shadow Weaver chose to pass down the lesson that she learned in Mysticor, that you must fight to gain power when you have none, and it won't come easy. Shadow Weaver fails at relaying this message though, and although Catra becomes extremely resilient and is able to fight hard for a position of leadership, Catra's motivation, unlike Shadow Weaver, was to gain worth, not to affect change. So ultimately, Shadow Weaver is pushed out of her position of responsibility in the Horde, replaced by Catra, and her connection to the Black Garnet giving her power is destroyed. Shadow Weaver flees the Horde because Catra is only able to offer limited survival to her. Shadow Weaver goes to Brightmoon to get healed by Adora. She has nowhere else to go, and she wants to seek revenge on Hordak and Catra. Angella doesn't plan to let Shadow Weaver seek revenge though. She keeps Shadow Weaver locked in the spare room. But when Hordak has come close to opening a portal, and Angella won't do anything about it, Glimmer turns to Shadow Weaver. And being the woman of action that she is, Shadow Weaver says that they must hurry, and she proposes a way to help Glimmer act on the situation that Angella refuses to. However, Shadow Weaver agrees to this only because it aligns with her own goals, and once in the Fright Zone, she wastes a lot of time trying to use Glimmer's power to enact her revenge on Catra. In Season 4, Shadow Weaver doesn't use Glimmer to gain power for herself, since Glimmer now has a strong connection to the Moonstone and doesn't need Shadow Weaver's help to access it. But she does shape Glimmer to follow her ideology compared to Angella's. Shadow Weaver has a nice line spewing this to Glimmer in Season 4, Episode 4, Pulse, where she tells Glimmer in reference to Glimmer's immense power, "It's all wasted if you don't use it." In this episode, Shadow Weaver helps Glimmer to decide that she should use her power to live up to the responsibility it comes with, correcting Angella's mistake. Shadow Weaver is actually a valuable source of counsel in this season, helping set a trap for Double Trouble in Episode 7, Mer Mysteries, and trying to get Glimmer to convene with the other princesses in Episode 12, Destiny, Part 1. Though, when Glimmer doesn't give Shadow Weaver all the information, and it looks like her plan isn't well thought out, Shadow Weaver does try to manipulate Glimmer using Angella's memory. In Season 5, Shadow Weaver does what she thinks is right in the fight against the Horde, namely trying to release the stored magic at the heart of Etheria to use against Horde Prime. This actually is what is needed to defeat Horde Prime, and despite nobody being happy with Shadow Weaver, she is the one who takes action and does the research to learn what they need to do to win the war. Shadow Weaver does not have the strength to carry out her plan alone and survive, so she tries to utilize Adora, convincing her to take the failsafe instead. And though Shadow Weaver is successful in getting Adora to take the failsafe, Shadow Weaver's plan ultimately fails, as Adora's attachment to Catra is now too strong, and Adora goes back to help Catra, steps away from the heart of Etheria. Shadow Weaver realizes that they aren't going to be able to release the magic at the heart to stop Horde Prime with Adora in this condition. So to get what she wants, Shadow Weaver has to save Catra. She can only do this through sacrificing her own life though. Shadow Weaver makes the sacrifice, making sure first that Catra understands what is at stake, and that Catra must ensure that Adora makes it to the heart of Etheria. As I have explained in my video essays, Catra's arc is not about redemption, and Catradora is conceptually beautiful. Shadow Weaver's sacrifice is what is needed for Catra to complete her character arc, shocking Catra into understanding Adora's mindset of self-sacrifice. And this is what saves Etheria. Shadow Weaver's sacrifice isn't meant to emotionally scar Catra and Adora further. It is the last piece of the puzzle that is required for Catradora to be successful. Shadow Weaver is a person of action and responsibility. She pushed for action in Mysticor. She shaped the Horde and Catra and Adora to reflect her ideals. In Brightmoon, she helped Glimmer live up to her ideals of the ones in power using their power. And she led the tactical battle in the fight against Horde Prime. But though Shadow Weaver was willing to act, she did not always have the power to do so herself, and she needed to use the power of others, Micah, Adora, and Glimmer. But you shouldn't make use of something that isn't yours. With great power comes great responsibility, but to be without power means to be without responsibility. Trying to manipulate a power that isn't yours, and that you don't understand, can have dire consequences. And ultimately, Shadow Weaver's manipulation of Adora and Catra led to a situation where Shadow Weaver, like Angella, needed to sacrifice herself to reconcile for her mistakes, and to get what she wanted. Shadow Weaver and Angella have told us two stories of the possible imbalances of power and action. Both of these stories promote that appropriate action must be taken based on the amount of power that you have. And I think that this ties in really nicely with how magic is portrayed in She-Ra. The magic of Etheria has been explained through Lighthope and Shadow Weaver, but the best explanation of magic that we get in the show comes from Season 4, Episode 9, Hero, where Raz tells Mara, "You cannot control magic. Magic simply is." Unlike magic in some stories that may require dedication, focus, and practice to control and use, She-Ra promotes the idea that magic is inherent in our natural existence. Which isn't to say how we exist in the moment, because people are ever changing, but how we exist as our best selves, unrepressed or controlled. Adora in Season 5 is not controlled by the First One's sword. Her She-Ra form is not weaponized. It is natural, and she is far more powerful because of this. When the princesses work together instead of isolating, they are able to complement each other and their magical power increases. Scorpia wasn't able to connect with the Black Garnet until she accepted her true identity as a princess. Micah, the most powerful sorcerer, has a unique and rustic, out-of-control feel to his magic, which gives him his own identity. Glimmer's power is at its height when she blends the magic of both Angella and Micah into one. And the Whispering Woods are both magical and natural. Magic in Etheria is strongest when everyone embraces who they are meant to be. The sacrifices of Angella and Shadow Weaver are made necessary because of their relationships with control. Angella looked to control Glimmer, and Angella herself was controlled by fear. Shadow Weaver looked to control Adora, Catra, Glimmer, Micah, and a power that wasn't hers to take. It is just as much necessary for Angella to accept the responsibility that comes with her power, as it is for Shadow Weaver to accept that there are some things that are outside of the realm of her responsibility. And these are tough lessons to take. Being in a position of power is not easy, because you are responsible for what happens to others. And when you have little power, sometimes you have to watch as large issues unfold, but the only way you can do something about it may be by using other people to do something about it, which could mean hurting people yourself. And this lesson that Shadow Weaver teaches us is interesting, because most of us do not have much power, but we see so much that is wrong with the world, and though we like to think that we can make a difference, it is not actually easy to do so yourself, and manipulating others to do your bidding may be repressing them from living their best life. Shadow Weaver's story is conflicting, because she was, without question, abusive, cruel, and manipulative to some of the characters on the show, but she was also one of the best at advocating for and taking action against the Horde. Without Shadow Weaver finding out about the failsafe and locating it, Horde Prime would have likely destroyed the universe. But there was another route Shadow Weaver could have taken. In real life, if the people with power don't live up to their responsibility, then there is cause for people to take action like Shadow Weaver. However, manipulation should not be the first resort to those without power looking to make change. It should be motivation. Motivating others through positive means and standing up for what you believe in a way that does not bring you more power, but pulls others towards your cause, is how we are able to effect change without hurting innocent people in the process. Shadow Weaver tried to motivate the other sorcerers to take power for themselves after the princess's magic proved ineffective against the Horde, but she tried no such motivation with Catra and Adora. This is why Shadow Weaver is ultimately a villain in the show, despite having some good intentions and ideals, and actually just doing a lot of good. I find it interesting that Shadow Weaver is so hated, despite the good that she has done, and I don't believe that she would be so villainous if the people in leadership had originally taken more action. If not everyone plays their part in society, then the system can break down, causing people to act like Shadow Weaver, and this is something that could very easily happen. So because Shadow Weaver's good deeds go unnoticed, I think that society and magic in She-Ra is idealistic. It is when people embrace the world as it is meant to be, unrepressed or controlled, people working together in unity, unique but cohesive, where existence becomes truly magical. And in a sense, when you think about moments in your life that were everything that you could possibly imagine and more, moments that were ideal, what else could you possibly describe them as but magical?